You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file.
That doesn't sound too hard.
Boom! This is Making Tracks. This is the way. Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
I know these people. They are brutal. Does this look Jedi to you?
That's not how the Force works.
They'll never see it coming.
Count me in.
So, for the people that don't know, for the people that don't know your story in relation to Star Wars specifically, how did the project come to you? When did you learn about it? How did you get involved for the first time?
For the initial stage, it was just like any other job, because we do this all the time, what we did at the beginning, have to go up and meet the casting director and if possible, the director. And in those days, the director was actually there. Nowadays, we have to do a video and send it in and so on. But gosh, I remember sitting in a cafe in Soho Square in London and reading a poem that I thought I should learn. And then the next, we stepped across the square and go up into 20th Century Fox on Soho Square. And the casting director then was called Irene Lamb. She said, don't hang about. George is very shy. He doesn't talk very much. So you do the talking. Well, so I walk in and there's George and a desk and me, and I started to talk. And I think I just done a film in Morocco and then Libya for about a year. I've been on it for 13 months, and so I think I remember talking about the desert, and I knew somehow or other they were going to shoot in North Africa, in Tunisia, and then, so I remember talking about the desert and shooting in the Sahara for a good number of weeks. And I don't know whether or not I mentioned what we wore to keep cool in the desert, but it might have involved a cape. And these are all memories that come back flooding after 50 years. So the talk in the desert, I don't know whether you know that my scene in Tunisia, well, you probably all do, because I've just been looking at it downstairs, actually. We have a lot of time to sit about, and I was looking at a script of the original draft that I got, and I think it was probably the 4th draft. And it involved this scene with Biggs and Luke on Tatooine, and it involved starting a very down-home kind of scene. We're around the petrol station, and the guys are playing kind of game on Biggs, Luke and I think Lindy, he was called, are playing a game on the with what do you call those things with pinball machine, sort of like that in the corner. And I come into this little petrol station, gas station if you like, on Tatooine, and Luke hasn't seen me for a long time. I'm his old friend coming back, and we have a great meeting, and it was sort of, it was a friend, really down home friends, because we're old friends on Tatooine. We hunted womp rats, and we've done pretty well growing up together. I was like an older brother to Luke. That's how our relationship began in the original script. So, but I forget all that. When I'm back in the office right at the very beginning, I didn't read the script. I didn't know anything about it, but I knew George had done American Graffiti, and I think I said that I liked American Graffiti. Directors have often told me you don't have to say that, but I because I did like it and it was a great film. But so that's all I knew. We talked about the desert, we talked about maybe that film. And when I left, I thought, yeah, it's another audition, good, it might come off, it might not. And later on, I got a call from the casting director saying, you know, he'd like you to do this space, and I didn't know much about it. I hadn't read the script then. So I got that, and during some conversation or other, she must have told my agent that I got 7 out of 10. That number has stuck with me. So 7, George must have been marking us all. 7 was the number that got me picked. And I didn't know anything about playing it until I got the full script in the mail later. So that's how it all began. I put the script, I was doing a television play at the time, and I was on the table and I said to the other actors, I don't know what this is about, but I think I'm going to do it. This is full of numbers like C3PO, I don't know what that, R2D2, and all that was new to me. It was a whole science fiction, new scene for me. So that's how it all began for me. Sorry about that. It was a long time.
Can we talk now? I got into Star Wars through pure nepotism. I live next door. I still live in the same house. He doesn't. He's got that. To the executive producer, Robert Watts, and we were just friends over the garden fence, you know, had drinks with each other sometimes, and we were in the garden one afternoon, talking over the fence, and I said, what are you doing next? And he said, I'm doing the second Star Wars film. I said, oh, that's great, good. He said, do you want to be in it? I called my wife and said that he just suggested I be in the next Star Wars film. Oh, and he said the part's not very big, but it's very important. Would you like to do it? And I said, of course I'd like to do it, Robert. Of course I would. This is one of the biggest franchises that's ever happened, and you're asking me to be in it. So I was in it. And that then led later on, a couple of years later, to Indiana Jones, for which he suggested me for the Nazi sergeant, colonel, which I didn't get. But I did get the leading villain in that film, and that's again through Robert Watts. So God bless his soul, and may he rest in peace. I've finished now.
Hi there, this is Mike Quinn. I played Nine Num in Return of the Jedi and the new trilogy, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
I have never been as lucky as Julian was to have such a good neighbour next door to me. I had never seen Star Wars when my agent sent me along to meet for Return of the Jedi, and I hadn't seen it because I kind of didn't like science fiction. I thought I didn't want to. It wasn't my kind of thing, and so I went and met for Return of the Jedi, and I met Richard Marquand, God rest his soul, who is the director, and he was a lovely man, and I was offered it. It was like 2 days filming. It was kind of just another job. For me, as a jobbing actor, as I thought at the time. I had no idea that I would be here 45 years later talking about it. I mean, it's extraordinary. Some of you may be interested to know that the big thing that seems to follow me around and haunt me was my beard reel in the film. And I will put you out of your misery and tell you that I turned up for my 2 days filming and went into makeup, and the makeup person said, oh, by the way, Dermot, we have a beard for you. And I said, no, I don't want a beard. And they said, no, we have this beard, you have to have a beard. And I said, look, if I knew I was going to have a beard, I'd have grown a beard. I'm allergic allergic to spirit gum, please, I'm not having it. And she sort of went away, and like 5 minutes later, Richard Markham came into makeup, and he said, Dermot, he said, do me a favour, wear the effing beard. And I said, oh, okay, you don't say no to the director. So I had the beard stuck on, and if you look very closely, you'll see the kind of globules of spirit gum at the temple. But and that was the end of it. I did my couple of days, and about like 9 months later, a great friend of mine, an actor called Ken Drury, rang me up and said, hey, Dermot, he said, there's a doll of you in Hamleys. And I said, what are you talking about? They didn't call them action figures in those days. And he said, yeah, he says, there's a doll from that Star Wars film. Anyway, so I went into Hamleys and I bought myself and brought myself home. And then I realised in the penny drop, they had made the doll before they cast me.
Oh my God.
And the doll had a beard. And that's why they insisted that morning. So that's the story of German.
Brilliant story.
There you go, unfinished.
Richard Markham, I was in the film that killed him. Really? Yes, he did a film called, what was it called now? Hearts of Fire, with Bob Dylan. And Bob Dylan is one of the most unpleasant people you could ever possibly meet. He'd never done any acting before, and certainly wasn't going to do any acting in our film either. And he was a complete nightmare. And it was otherwise rather a nice shoot, except he was so horrible. And Richard had such terrible. For instance, we had a big concert in Toronto where we were doing the film to star Bob Dylan. That was the whole point of it. It was about a fading big star, and so the theatre was obviously full of people, packed with people. He didn't turn up. Didn't feel like it that evening. Okay, that's nice of him, wasn't it? And he had that all the way through, right through to the dubbing afterwards and everything, and it killed Richard Markham.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video and social media feeds, bookmark FanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
It strikes me we've got 3 actors from the original film, the sequel, and the second sequel, so original trilogy. And even though all of your roles on the face of it are relatively small compared to the size of the movie, they're all integral to the plot. Garrick, you play Luke's best friend, who perishes at the end of the film, spoiler alert. Julian, obviously the commander, the only Imperial commander you ever really see get a victory in the original trilogy, the Battle on Hoth. And Dermot, obviously part of the attack on the Death Star in Return of the Jedi. When you all took your roles, I'll start with you, Garrick, when you took the role, I mean, you couldn't have conceived that it would actually turn out to be such an important role in the journey of Luke, who is the main character we follow all the way through.
No, I don't think any of us knew, and neither did Mark actually know or think it would be a historical film as it became to be. And it was all pretty well discovered as you go. We didn't have any pre-knowledge. And in fact, we were all surprised when years later it became so big, and we're all grateful to it.
Yeah, you were in the first one. Yeah, by the time I got to do mine, you were in the third.
Yes.
Yeah. We'd already seen the first one, and we young actors had been completely staggered by it. We've never seen anything like it in our life, nor have we since, frankly.
Yes.
And so we were used to, that's why I was so honoured to be asked over the garden fence whether I wanted to be in the second one. Bloody hell! So that initial thing, obviously he knew by that time that it was a great success.
Yeah, but
well,
that came years later. In fact, I didn't have much to do with it until I was put back in a little bit in 1998. I had very little and didn't really mention it. I noticed that, I look back through various interviews and things, but it really wasn't a part of my resume. I mean, I probably put it in along with others, but until 1998, I think I pretty well ignored it. It's amazing. I think I deliberately did when I saw the very first showing of it, and I was cut. And so it took a few years to get used to the fact that I had been cut. Because it was a big scene, into my terms, it was 4.5 minutes, and I've just been reading the script. And there's some really good dialogue, and it's a lovely relationship, and I think Mark felt this too. He felt, and I think Marcia, George's wife, who edited the film with him at first, Marcia wanted it, and there was a great apparently a lot of discussion about it. And I don't think George has ever explained really publicly. I think he did once in San Diego, right at the very beginning, something about he didn't feel the scene fit, but not till Garrick Hertz came, the other producer came along, and I asked him, and he said, I don't know, it could have been one of the reasons, that he just felt it slowed the beginning of the film down. There was too much dialogue. It was 4 minutes of a relationship that didn't go anywhere until the very end, and they wanted to speed into the film and didn't want us to hang around on Tatooine listening to these guys talk. But when looking back on it, a lot of people feel that it establishes a lovely warmth between the two guys, which Mark maybe needed just to show the development from being a young man to what he became as the hero of the film later.
But the film, when it started, the beginning for the first Star Wars film, with those planes diving straight at the audience through these things. I remember, I was a grown man. It was so exciting. It wasn't even in 3D.
No.
And it was so, the way it started off, with that great big bang like that, just completely threw me and all my friends, we were ringing each other up saying, you must see this fantastic film. Rather like Game of Thrones, if I may say. Completely different thing, but completely original, nothing to do with anything else that had happened before. Enough, Julian.
Hi, this is Robbie from Skeleton Crew, and you are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Dermot, when you came in then on the third film, you say you've not seen Star Wars before, were you kind of aware of the cultural sort of noise that it had made, even if you hadn't even seen the films?
I was, yes, of course, because I mean it was so big. People queuing around the block to see it at midnight. Once they were released and everything, it was all kind of very exciting. But I guess because I'd only done a couple of days on it, and I always in my head as an actor thought this is such a minor part in Return of the Jedi, that I kind of went on and just did other things and sort of forgot about it. And I didn't do conventions for years and years and years because they didn't appeal to me. And then eventually somebody said, look, you really should go and just try it. And I did. And I started meeting people, fans, lovers of the Star Wars universe, who knew much more about my character and what happened to him than I ever did. And I discovered that there was a whole hinterland to this particular character in the books and the novels and the games and all sorts of things. But I eventually went to a convention in Chicago, and it was a real wake-up call to me as to what I was part of, even on such a minor level. I was at this convention, and I was sitting at the table with the photographs, and suddenly two guys started coming towards me, and if I'd seen them in the street, I'd have crossed the road, right? They looked seriously dangerous. They had rings everywhere and tats, and they were big, and they looked as if they could pick you up and just sling you, And they came up to the table, and I wasn't very good at it. at that time, and so they said that they wanted a picture, and for the sake of something really brilliantly original to say, as I was signing it, I said, so you're big Star Wars fans then? And one of them said, oh yes we are, George Lucas is our father. Oh. And I looked at them and I thought, there is no way on God's earth that George Lucas is your father. And I thought, how am I going to handle this? So I said, oh, really? And he immediately said, oh, I don't mean our real father. He said, when we were small boys, our dad left our mom and she had to raise us all on her own. And we learned everything we know about what's right and wrong and good and evil from the Star Wars world. And we're here to say thank you for coming to Chicago. I mean, I was in bits, and it was so fantastic because it immediately explained to me, or made sense, as to why we're all still here 50 years later. There is no, you know, there are famous films, of course, like Gone with the Wind and all of those classic films and the Brando movies, but there's nothing like Star Wars because it touches people in a really seriously deep way if they're open to it. And it certainly enriched my life coming to conventions ever since.
That's interesting what you say, that young people, there's one there, young people are just as, who haven't been brought up with it for 40 years, are so keen on it. People who come up, kids come up for autographs just as much as the adults do. It's remarkable. That's all it was saying about the nature of the thing and what it taught and what it taught, teaches, etc., is actually all there.
It is.
It really is there, and that's why Alec Guinness did it.
Yeah. I just curiously done a book on audiobook, what's called an audiobook, an audio drama called Love Wars. Now this man came to me about 4 years ago and said, I want you to do this production, and I want Mark Hamill to play the father. It's about the breakup of my parents' marriage and what it did to me at that age, and how Star Wars got me through that terrible time. And he just wrote to me maybe a week ago saying it's finally published on audiobook with a number of companies. You could download it, and it's about 6 hours long about this. But it's called Love Wars, and not only because Star Wars affected him in the way that Dermot says, but it changed his life. It held him together and repaired a lot of the damage that his parents had done to him. So it's a very personal book, and it's a very personal production. But on the other hand, he does incorporate a pastiche of the music, and also incorporate a lot of the thoughts that came along as he kept watching Star Wars through the divorce of his parents, and how it might help other people going through somehow the same thing of having their parents divorced while they're very young. But it had this effect, and it just curiously ties in with what Dermot was saying.
That's what we've run out of time, I'm afraid, but I could keep talking for another hour. This has been brilliant. Have a big round of applause for the guys there.
Email radio@fanthatracks.com. Head to links.fanthatracks.com for links to our social media feeds, Fantha Tracks TV and Fantha Tracks Radio. Thanks to James Semple for the Fantha Tracks intro, Blues Harvest for our Making Tracks opening music, and Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers. New episodes drop Tuesdays and Fridays at 7 o'clock UK time. Our weekly news show, Good Morning Tatooine, goes live Sundays at 9 o'clock UK time on Facebook and YouTube. And remember, Fantha Tracks is absolutely free, so it costs nothing to stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news.
Coming up next on Fantha Tracks Radio, it's Planet Leia.